Amari Jefferson has committed to Tennessee. Tennessee's transfer portal situation is not grand. We'll go through that. But how big of a get is Amari Jefferson, Jimmy?
I think it's big in that they really need receivers. I mean, they lost 5 receivers. And I kind of had an interesting conversation. Somebody said, well, Squirrel White, they won't miss him at all. I said, yeah, you miss him when you got 5 other guys in the portal, and he is your leading returning receiver in terms of catches. He had 67 catches 2 years ago. Let's not forget that. And this past year, he played with a bum shoulder. So I think that impacted him. You got to fortify that position. I think Mike Matthews is going to be a really nice player. I think Staley has a chance to be pretty good. Brazel, I still think he has a chance to be pretty good. But you really needed to have not only quality, but some depth there. And so now here's my concern, though, Dave. My concern is that typically first-year receivers at Tennessee, in particular, freshmen. I know that Jefferson's not a freshman, but transfers have done a little bit better. But new receivers at Tennessee have not prospered. They haven't done anything like what Ryan Williams did at Alabama or like Jeremiah Smith did at Ohio State, who's just brilliant. But those two had eye-popping numbers. And Matthews, what do you do? Catch 10 passes? So anyway, my point is with Jefferson, I think it's very important. I think he's a very talented receiver. Tennessee has got to figure out how to get production from their first-year players, whether they're transfers or freshmen at receiver. Brew McCoy had a pretty good first year at Tennessee. Javonte Payton, I think, had maybe 6 touchdown catches, but he didn't catch 30 balls. They got to do a better job of getting their first-year players. And if that's simplifying the offense, because they do a lot of reading, as you know, at the receiver position. The receivers run routes based on the defensive formations or what the defense is doing. Then the quarterback has to read it too. I think they might have to simplify some of that to get more production from first-year players.
That's a great point. Caleb?
Jimmy, okay, so I want to do a quick blame pie last year, and then I'll ask you if Amari Jefferson helps to alleviate any of these issues. Do you think the issue was injuries with Brew McCoy and Squirrel White, which slowed them down? They weren't reading the routes properly? Or was Nico not reading the routes properly? And would Amari Jefferson help with any of this?
I think that the young receivers are not reading it properly. I think that there was an adjustment from Matthews in that regard. I think there was an adjustment from Brazel in that regard. I also don't think Nico played very well the first half of the year. I didn't think he was as accurate as I thought he would be. I didn't think he saw the field as well as he needed to. He didn't look that comfortable to me. So, but I'm going to put most of it on the receivers. I was extremely disappointed in the wide receivers. You saw some drops. Not as many as Georgia, but you saw some drops. You also saw, well, you didn't see him getting wide open like they did a couple of years before that in 2022. Now, is that scheme? Is that receivers not running the right route? All the reasons why, I don't know. But I put most of that on the receivers. I think Jefferson can help with that. But he is – and here's the thing. When he comes in, man, they need to get out there and work and drill and get reps with him and get him on the same page with Nico. Because if they don't, then I don't know how productive he's going to be. But I do think he'll help him in the passing game. And I think he's got, as athletic as he is, I think he's got a chance to make some explosive plays as well.
Jimmy, I wrote this, and I adhere to what I learned from you. And those that don't know, Jimmy's been my mentor for a lot of years. I don't call for coaches' jobs, but I have to question the decision by Josh Heupel just to elevate internally guys like Alec Eberle and Joey Halsley, Kelsey Pope. I'm not sure that there's another voice that's being heard like Alex Golish was. And to me, it all falls on Josh Heupel, and that's in and of itself problematic.
I think that they miss Alex Golish from a game planning standpoint, which includes the ability to identify how to exploit a defense. And that includes Alabama's defense in 2022 when Tennessee scored 52 points. He did a great job of isolating, for example, Jalen Hyatt on a safety. And there aren't many safeties that can keep up with him. And you saw receivers running wide open all the time. I think a lot of that was Golish with his game planning. The play calling is Heupel's. So, although Halsley is called the offensive coordinator, in my opinion, he's quarterback's coach.
Yep.
I think Heupel's the offensive coordinator. I don't know what Eberle brings to the table. And this may be unfair because I'm saying this from 10,000 feet. If you've got that many receivers transferring out of your program, is there not a problem with your receivers coach, with the relationship and the lack of production he got out of those guys? I got to wonder about that. Now, I'm not in the building, so I don't know. But it does bring a question to my mind about how efficient Kelsey Pope has been as a receivers coach.
Great.
So let's ask the unfortunate question then that we have to ask related to Tennessee, because everybody's excited about landing Amari Jefferson. But he is from Chattanooga. Mm-hmm. People who covered his recruitment said he probably would have gone to Tennessee if not for Nick Saban. Right. So, Jimmy, is Tennessee landing Amari Jefferson more about something special Tennessee's doing at receiver that makes him want to be part of that, or just the fact that Nick Saban retired at Alabama and he was a born and raised Tennessee guy and they got him by default?
I think it was the latter. I think if Saban hadn't retired and he had any production as a freshman, he'd have stayed for whatever reason. And I didn't think Alabama's receivers were great. Did y'all?
No.
So I thought he could have gotten some playing time. I mean, they had one great receiver, Ryan Williams, the freshman. The other guys were okay, but not anything special. So I think if Saban had been there, but I don't know this, but it's conjecture. I think that Amari Jefferson would have been a lot more productive there and would have stayed if Saban had been there. And I think he felt like, okay, I don't fit into what Kalen DeBoer's doing here. And so I need to, and Tennessee was my second choice. So I think that's why he went to Tennessee. I think if Saban had stayed at Alabama, Jefferson would have stayed there as well.
Well, he actually said that. It was quoted in On 3 where he said once Nick Saban left, it kind of got a little murky there, which as a matter of fact, I want to read the quote to you if I can, Jimmy, because I think this says something about Alabama nearly as much as it says something about Tennessee. He told On 3, quote, "Just with Saban retiring and like his whole staff kind of me being close with them and them not being there anymore, I just kind of felt like I wanted to change, and Tennessee was very close to my recruitment out of high school, and I feel very comfortable with the people up at Tennessee. Getting back close to home is kind of what I just wanted to do, and I think that's the best place for me is to be at Tennessee." If I'm an Alabama fan, that quote scares me.
Well, he's not the only one that left Alabama when Saban retired, right?
Right.
They had, was it 25, 27? It was a lot that left Alabama. And Alabama helped Ohio State with Caleb Downs. They helped Texas's receiving core. They helped they helped Tennessee at tight end with Miles Kitselman. So, yeah, they lost some really good players at Alabama, and I don't think that they replaced them in a lot of cases with players that were as good. Hey, the guy that won the Remington Award, Seth McLaughlin at Ohio State, he transferred from Alabama too. Caleb Downs is the one everybody talks about, but McLaughlin was a great center. So, yeah, I think Saban's departure had a lot of impact on transfers, and I don't think Alabama replaced as many good players in the portal. So I think that did hurt them a lot. And here's kind of an interesting side note of that. I was talking to somebody the other day. Because you're playing so many games in college football now with the playoffs, you could end up playing 17 games. Never has depth been more important in college football now. But seldom have you had less depth than now because of the transfer portal.
I think the days of Alabama's dynasty at any school are over. I just don't think you're going to have the depth. Of course, I mean, it's not like even if you had the depth, you're going to win. They win 7 titles. So it's not like that's going to happen anyway. Caleb, I know you got something else for Jimmy before we get him out the door.
Yeah, and Jimmy, I've kind of talked about this, and I don't know if you know, I do these long form videos on Off the Hook, and I did a deep dive to Saban's success last year, and I know you've covered him to a certain degree. How much, we think of Nick Saban as kind of a defensive whiz who kind of lets other guys run the offense when he found an offensive coordinator, but we're seeing all these offensive players who left when Saban left. How much do we underrate Nick Saban as an offensive coach to the degree that I would argue if he wanted to, he could have been an offensive coordinator? at any school.
I think he could have been too, because look, first off, he's very smart. And to be frank, he's smarter than most head coaches out there. And as a defensive coordinator, he knows how to take away the offensive strength, right? That was one of the things he did as a head coach / defensive coordinator at Alabama. Therefore, on the flip side, he knows what gives the defense trouble. And I think that he had a lot of input, for example, a year ago with the way they used Jalen Milroe. Because, hey, as you remember, he got benched for South Florida. And then when he came back, he played like gangbusters, but they used him differently. And they used his legs a lot. He ran a lot. And that's what he needed to do to be efficient. So I think Saban was smart enough to recognize that. And I do think he has a lot of input on what they do on offense. Now, he'll turn it over to Sarkisian or a Lane Kiffin, someone like that, but not completely. I would bet you that he's got his input and game planning about, okay, Lane, you're not going to throw it 63 times. We're going to run it, and we're going to do this. So I do think he would have been a good offensive coach because he's such a smart football coach.
Yeah, I was told that it was not unheard of for him to rip up a game plan by a coach on his staff on a Thursday night, defensive or offensive game plan, and just redo it.
And mostly it was probably Kiffin's.
Well, yes,
remember that?
Yes,
hey, that wasn't a conversation. Remember that wasn't a conversation. That was a butt chewing.
That's right.
Well, I always go back to the 0 SEC title. We always talk about how Tennessee screwed that up so badly, but we never think about the fact that Nick Saban was prepared just like that to go from Rohan David and Matt Mock and totally change the offense in the middle of an SEC championship game. I don't know any coach that could have pulled that off.
Well, they did, and Matt Mock must have run 13 quarterback draws.
That's low. No.
Inexplicably, from Tennessee's perspective, they didn't adjust.
Yeah,
I was surprised Tennessee didn't adjust to that. So.
Okay, so Jimmy, let me ask you this: as of mid-January, are you more or less optimistic about Tennessee's football season? If you give me just a second to think about that, I want to remind you, you can stop by Dynasty Pools and Spas in Athens. Stop by, free gift from Off the Hook Sports, either a T-shirt or a book, and $500 off spa of your choice, and they include everything. So more or less optimistic than this time last year with Jimmy Hyams. Dave Hooker here for Dynasty Pools and Spas, your home for the best spas and everything you need to jump right in. Relaxing, therapeutic, absolutely. But what sets Dynasty Pools and Spas apart from others is that you get everything with any spa purchase. You get the cover lift, the steps, delivery, and chemicals. When Dynasty Pools and Spas delivers your spa from their Athens location within 125 miles, you'll get your own personal hydrotherapy spa. Mention me, Dave Hooker, or Off the Hook Sports, and get $500 off your top quality new spa. Dynasty Pools and Spas, just off the Athens exit. Drop in and receive a free gift from Off the Hook Sports, Dynasty Pools and Spas. Mention Off the Hook Sports for a drop-in prize and that $500 discount, Dynasty Pools and Spas. To check out some of the Dynasty Spa models and to buy spa chemicals, go to dynastypoolsandspas.com. So, Jim, more or less optimistic this year as opposed to this time last year about football season?
Less. It's less because I think Tennessee has so many holes to fill. I mean, are they going to be better at wide receiver right now? I'd say no. Are they going to be better on the offensive line where they've lost at least 5 players and 4 starters? No. Are they going to be better at running back without Dylan Sampson? No. Are they going to be better at quarterback with Nico? Yes. But I don't know that he can carry the offense. Defensively, they've lost some really good players. They won't have the depth on the defensive line that they had. I think they're pretty average at linebacker, in part because the linebackers are not very good in pass coverage. I think the secondary can be as good or better than it was. But overall, if you were just to pick numbers from 1 to 10, if I thought last season for Tennessee was an 8 out of 10, right now with this roster, I think it's a 6 or a 7. I don't think roster-wise they're as good. Now, ask me that in about 2 or 3 weeks when they finish in the transfer portal. I may have a different answer. But right now, my answer is I'm not as optimistic.
Yeah, but guys, both of you jump in. Jimmy, we'll let you out of here. But my concern for Tennessee football is they they're not hot. They're not sexy right now in the transfer portal. I mean, after the 2022 season, they're scoring 500 million points, and everybody wanted to sign up. And I don't feel that buzz like you did, like I saw the previous couple of years. And some of that was signing Nico as well.
Well, I think there's some truth to that, and I think look, I give Tennessee a lot of credit for winning 10 games and making the college football playoff, even as flawed as that team was. But boy, that Ohio State game seemed to take a lot of starch out of the season and the way you viewed it. So, yeah, I can't say they've got a lot of momentum. There are teams out there that have signed at least 10 players in the transfer portal. And Tennessee has signed, what, two or three in the portal?
Oh, they got 2 right now. They got the Wendell Moe, the offensive lineman out of Arizona.
Amari Jefferson. That's it in the portal.
That's it.
So now, granted, a year ago, most of the people they got in the portal were in January, so there is still time. So that's why I said maybe in 2 or 3 weeks I'd change my opinion. But right now, looking at this roster and looking at the areas where I don't think they'll be as good right now next year as they were this past year, I'm not very optimistic.
Yeah,
Jimmy,
and sorry, and Jimmy, I just want to point out too, just one thing that's kind of being lost on everybody is how many people who run this veer and shoot offense struggled this past year. I mean, Lincoln Riley runs a similar offense. He was awful this past year. Jeff Levy had a horrible first year at Mississippi State. I'm starting to question whether or not this offense is getting figured out too.
That's possible. I remember talking to a coach. I've done this for years, and I've talked to some SEC coaches in the offseason. And I said, do you think teams will figure out Tennessee's offense? Because most of the time you see that. And his answer was no, not as long as Josh Heupel's there calling plays. So he thinks Heupel can stay a step ahead. But I also think that Heupel cannot stay a step ahead unless he's got quality players at receiver. Well, and I think Nico's going to be a quality player. I think he finished the season strong. But Tennessee is not real good on the offensive line or at wide receiver. And if you're not, I think it makes it a little bit harder, not just a little bit, maybe a lot harder to be as efficient with this offense. They'll probably never score 46 points a game again. But on the flip side, if you can average 38 points, that ain't bad. That's a whole lot better than what Pruitt was doing. But here's the other thing you got to look at too. What's your SEC scoring average? And that wasn't very good. What was it, 25, 26 points a game? That's not where you want to be.
I wonder what the average number of points at Tennessee.
You mean those onside kicks versus Kent State don't help your playoff odds, guys?
They averaged 62 points against non-conference opponents. And then they averaged about 26 maybe against SEC. And yet they won 10 games and made the college football playoff. So I guess maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit, but that does make you concerned going forward. But I do think this offense has enough answers in it, but you have to have the right personnel and the right play caller to overcome the defense that's catching up with you.
Jimmy, have a blessed day. We appreciate it. I'm sorry to keep you so long. Apologize for the connection. And racquetball is going to happen. And I am going to be victorious after Jimmy beat me back in 2000 in Philadelphia at the Women's Final Four with his left hand.
Yep, it was the Liberty Bell was on my side. I cracked the code on Dave Hooker.
Never been so embarrassed in my life. Here I'm 10, 15 years younger, and it was close. And Jimmy says, "Oh yeah, I'm right-handed," and he had tennis elbow, so he played left-handed to still beat me.
Yeah, I'm amphibious.
That's right. Breathes underwater. Thank you, Jim.
Have a good day, guys.